So if you're just getting into React, you've probably had this moment of, well, total confusion. You open up a component file, you're expecting to see some JavaScript, but instead it looks like you've just walked into an HTML document. What you're really looking at is one of React's most powerful and, yeah, most confusing features at first.
And this is the big question, right? It just feels wrong. We've all been taught for years to keep things separate. Structure here, styling there, logic over here. And yet, here we are, staring at what looks for all the world like HTML, right in the middle of our JavaScript.
You see something exactly like this. A totally normal H1 tag. It's got the brackets, it's got content. I mean, it walks like HTML, it quacks like HTML, but, and this is the whole point, it is not HTML. And getting that difference is the key to unlocking how React really works.
Okay, so what is this stuff then? Well, it has a name. It's called JSX, and its true identity is way more powerful than just simple markup. You can think of it like a bit of a magic trick, a really clever disguise for something else entirely.
JSX, it stands for JavaScript XML. But honestly, the best way to wrap your head around it is to think of it as JavaScript that's pretending to be HTML. It was designed so we developers could have a much more intuitive, more readable way to describe what our UI should look like, using a syntax we already know.
So here's the absolute crucial point. Every single time you write a JSX tag, you are not writing markup. What you're really doing is writing a JavaScript function call. It's what we call syntactic sugar. Just a friendly, easy-to-read shorthand for a more complex piece of code that's running behind the scenes.
And this is where we pull back the curtain on that magic trick. The nice, readable JSX we write on the left gets fed into a compiler, usually a tool called Babel. That compiler then transforms our JSX into a standard react.createElement function call. That's just pure JavaScript that any browser can understand. It takes the tag, its properties, its content, and just turns it all into a function.
Okay, so JSX becomes a function call. We get that. But how does that function call turn into an actual button or a heading that you can see on the screen? Well, that's all part of the rendering process.
That react.createElement function doesn't immediately draw something in your browser. Nope. Instead, it returns a really lightweight JavaScript object. The best way to think of this object is like a blueprint or description. It's basically a set of instructions that tells React, hey, I want you to render an H1 tag, and I want it to have this text inside of it.
And this lays out that entire journey perfectly. First, you write your friendly, readable JSX. Second, the compiler does its job and transforms it into that react.createElement function. Third, that function runs and returns the JavaScript object, our blueprint. And then finally, a library like React DOM takes that blueprint and efficiently builds the real HTML that your users actually see and interact with.
Now that we know what JS is and how it works, let's talk about how to actually write it correctly. Because it's not exactly like HTML, there are a few golden rules you've got to follow to keep from running into errors.
So here are the 5 big ones to remember. First, you always have to return a single parent element. Second, for styling, you have to use class name instead of class. Third, if you want to use any JavaScript, you put it inside curly braces. Fourth, all the attributes are written in camel case. And finally, your own React components have to start with an uppercase letter. Let's look at a couple of these right now.
Okay, rule number 1. Your component has to return a single root element. You can't have 2 tags just sitting next to each other at the top level. And why is that? Well, remember, it's all just a function, and a function can only return one thing. The fix is super easy. Just wrap everything in a container, like a div, or something called a React fragment.
This one trips up everybody at first. You can't use the class attribute for CSS classes. You have to use class name. And the reason is actually really simple when you think about it. This is all just JavaScript in disguise, right? And in JavaScript, the word class is a reserved keyword for creating JavaScript classes. So using class name avoids that name conflict.
And finally, naming is everything in JSX. When the compiler sees a lowercase tag like div, it knows, okay, that's a standard HTML element. But when it sees an uppercase tag, like my component, it knows you're talking about one of your own custom React components. This simple convention is how React tells the difference. So after all that, what's the one thing you absolutely need to drill into your brain about JSX? What's the main idea that ties this whole thing together?
This is it. This is why JSX even exists. It gives you that familiar, easy-to-read syntax of HTML, which is just fantastic for describing a UI, but it combines it with the full expressive power of JavaScript. You can use variables, you can run loops, you can use logic,
right there inside your markup. And please, never ever forget this crucial technical detail. If you tried to run JSX directly in a browser's console, it would just throw an error. It's not valid JavaScript on its own. It has to go through that compilation step with a tool like Babel to be turned into plain old JavaScript that browsers can actually run.
So if you only take away one sentence from this whole thing, let it be this one. JSX is a brilliant illusion. It looks and it feels like HTML to make our jobs easier and our code way more readable. But at its heart, it is just a powerful and elegant way to write JavaScript functions.
And that leads to a final thought. Once you stop seeing JSX as some weird HTML-like limitation and you start seeing it for what it really is, pure JavaScript, a whole new world of possibilities just opens up. You're not just writing static markup anymore. You are programmatically creating dynamic, data-driven interfaces. So the real question is, what will you build with that power?